Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going deep into something that might have you rethinking, well, maybe your entire romantic history. You ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so we're talking about how those love lessons that we learned or maybe didn't learn from our parents can actually show up in our adult relationships.
Yeah, it's so true. We often carry these invisible blueprints from childhood that really shape how we approach love and connection and even conflict.
It's like we were secretly being trained to be relationship experts, like right from day one.
Exactly.
But the training wheels were off, so we didn't know. So our source material for this deep dive is this really fascinating episode from the Love Unlocked podcast.
Love that podcast.
Yeah, me too. And they just break down how powerful this whole parental influence can be on our love lives.
Yeah, and it goes way beyond those super awkward dating tips that your parents may have given you growing up.
Oh, tell me about it.
It goes to those deep-seated beliefs about what to expect from a partner, how to communicate, all that really important stuff. Yeah.
Psychologists even have a term for these blueprints. They call them internal working models.
Internal working models. Okay, can we break that down a little? What does that even mean? How does that play out in our lives?
Okay, so think about this. From the moment you're born, you are observing your parents' relationship.
Oh, 100%.
How they talk to each other, how they argue or don't argue,
Oh, right.
how they show affection, all of that goes into building your internal working model.
So, if my parents were constantly bickering growing up, then my internal working models are going to be that, relationships are all about conflict.
Exactly. And that model can then go on to influence how you approach your own relationships.
Okay.
You might find yourself, way more comfortable with conflict. Maybe you avoid it at all costs
Interesting.
because it feels too familiar.
Yeah, right. Wow. It's actually a little unnerving when you really think about it. But the podcast also mentioned that it's not just about our parents' relationship, but also their actual parenting style.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
I remember them talking about how kids who were raised by those authoritarian parents, the my way or the highway type, they often have such a different experience in relationships than kids who maybe were raised with authoritative parents who set boundaries, but are also warm and supportive.
Absolutely, and it makes total sense if you think about it. So let's take those two contrasting styles as examples. Imagine you grew up with authoritarian parents. Very strict, lots of rules, not much room for discussion or debate.
Right.
Okay, so now you're an adult and you're trying to navigate a romantic relationship.
So with those strict parents, those authoritarian parents, how does that play out when you're an adult in a relationship?
Yeah. So if you think about it, if you never really got that chance as a kid to kind of express your own opinions or even just your own needs, you might find it as an adult really, really challenging to assert yourself in a romantic relationship.
Yeah, it's almost like their voice gets lost, even if they desperately want to use it.
Exactly. They don't even know how.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on the flip side, think about someone who maybe had those authoritative parents. The ones, we said they were firm but fair. They encourage open communication, all that good stuff.
So their internal working model is probably totally different.
Totally different.
Okay.
They've learned, through watching their parents how to express their needs, how to kind of navigate those disagreements constructively. They're more likely to see conflict as an opportunity to grow.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of this big scary thing to avoid.
Yeah. So it's not always the big blowout fights that are the issue, but sometimes it's the little day-to-day stuff. If your partner, constantly forgets to take out the trash, are you comfortable enough to just be hey, can you please take out the trash? Or do you just kind of let it slide?
Yes, exactly. And those little moments, they tell us so much about those internal working models, right?
Oh.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting, because the Love Unlocked episode, they also talked about this whole idea of our parents being kind of relationship role models.
Yeah. It's one thing to tell your kids to be kind, to be respectful, but are you actually working the walk in your own relationship,
Right. Because kids, they are like sponges. They're soaking up everything they see.
Oh, yeah.
How mom and dad handle their disagreements, how they express affection, how they divide up, even the household chores, right? All of those little seemingly mundane details, they become a part of that internal working model.
It's like they're learning this whole secret language of relationships
Yeah.
just by observing.
Yeah.
So, like, what if you didn't have the best relationship role models growing up?
Okay.
Like, are you kind of destined to just, like, repeat those patterns?
Right. That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the good news is, no, it's not predetermined. We have the power to choose differently, but it all starts with awareness.
Wow. Okay, so awareness is key. I got it. But,
Yeah.
like, let's say you've done all the reflecting, you've cringed at all those memories of your parents' relationship, and you're like, oh, wow, I'm kind of repeating some of those patterns. What's next? Like, how do you actually break free? How do we, like, rewrite the script?
Well, the Love Unlocked episode, they actually gave some really like practical advice. They talk about three kind of main strategies: awareness, which we've already talked about, and then also communication skills, and then positive modeling.
Okay, I like that. So, like, even if we didn't have the best examples growing up, it doesn't mean that we're, like, stuck. We can
Mhm.
actually learn how to have, healthier, happier relationships.
Totally. We have so much power to create change, right? And those communication skills, they're huge. They're really important. Like, for example, say your parents were the type to like just totally avoid conflict, just sweep
The-
everything under the rug. You, as an adult, you might really need to kind of like consciously practice expressing your needs, setting boundaries. It's almost like you're learning like a new language. It's true.
But a language for your relationships.
Yeah. And what about that last one? Positive modeling. That sounds like pretty powerful.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Because, like, even if you didn't have those great examples in your own family, in your own life, you can still choose to be that positive role model for your partner, for your friends, for your kids if you have them.
It's like you're breaking those cycles. And it's not just like for you, but it's kind of like a ripple effect. It goes out to like everyone around you too.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, it's never too late to, like, learn, grow, create healthier patterns in our lives.
Yeah.
Right? Love that. Okay, this has been, like, seriously eye-opening. We learned about internal working models. We talked about, like, all the different parenting styles and, even how our parents' relationship dynamic kind of becomes this blueprint for our own. But I think most importantly, what we've learned is that we actually have, like, the power to break free from, like, those old patterns that aren't serving us and create, like, way more fulfilling relationships.
Mhm.
So as we kind of, like, wrap things up here, any, like, final, like, thought-provoking nuggets that you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, we've been talking a lot about like romantic relationships, but these dynamics, these patterns, they can actually play out in all different kinds of relationships in our lives.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like, how might your parents approach to their friendships, or even in like their work relationships? How might that be, kind of subtly influencing your own approach to those relationships?
That's such a good point. It's like those internal working models, they're at work everywhere, not even just our romantic relationships. So much to think about. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into kind of like the surprisingly powerful ways that like our parents shape our relationships. And remember, awareness is like the first step to creating that positive change. Until next time.